It was pretty big. And because I masked and didn't want people to know that I was different, even though they knew I was different, because that's why I was being bullied, right? I went along with it, and obviously that is not okay mentally, and it led me down some paths because I was trying to be what society told me to be. So during high school, I was the dumb kid because
Hi, Hive community. Thank you guys so much for joining us on our first podcast in talking inclusivity with the Hive. And we are joined by our very first guest, Mark Fleming. I'm going to just do a brief introduction of Mark, but then I'm going to let him kind of tell you a little bit more about himself. Mark actually has joined our nonprofit as a wellness instructor and been a part of our wellness events. He's also well known around Tampa. He is an autistic doctoral candidate. He's the founder of a business called Equally Fit, which is a fitness brand. He's going to tell you more about that. He's also been the chair of an organization called the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, shortened for CARD, as well as being a part of numerous advisory boards and things across Tampa. He's gotten his bachelor's, master's, and now doctorate at Concordia University at St. Paul. So welcome, Mark.
thank you.
So one, we've kind of been talking before things started, but we talked a little bit about Equally Fit, which is the fitness brand that you founded 7 years ago. Can you tell us a little bit more about Equally Fit?
It started off kind of as a personal training service that worked with individuals with autism that ended up expanding to all disabilities in hopes to empower individuals to live their best lives, being physically active, being able to just be able to move around in their daily life the best that they can to the best of their capability.
And I know when I was reading about Equally Fit that you've gotten quite a lot of accolades and press. Like, can you tell us some of the areas that has recognized your business?
Yes, I was. CNN did an article on me. All the news stations in the Tampa Bay area did stories on me. The University of Alabama Alumni Magazine did a story on me. The Men's Health Magazine did a story on me, and a few others. I want to say Now News, I think is what it's called, and a bunch of other little news places.
Oh,
So I pretty much traveled the world when the studio opened.
yeah. Wow. So I'm going to come back to that because, part of our podcast is talking about what it's like to be an entrepreneur with disability and some of the challenges that you face that have come with that. So before that, though, I kind of want to go back, you know, to the question of your journey with autism. And like, can you share a little bit about your personal journey and maybe even just some challenges or obstacles that, especially at this point, you're working on your doctorate, like that you faced?
So I was originally diagnosed with PDD-NOS. That's pervasive developmental disabilities, not otherwise specified. When I was about 3 years old, I was having trouble with fine motor issues, difficulty. I was a late walker. I had a very monotone voice. I still get into that every now and then. So that led me to kind of go to therapies to help with those, which I was very fortunate to do. Got out of those therapies probably by the time I was 8. Then my family had to move to the Tampa Bay area when I was about 10, and I was diagnosed shortly after with Asperger's, which is now just autism level 1. And that kind of hit me big because I was told, it's a social disorder, but yet, when I was growing up, I had a great group of friends. Like, I didn't notice anything different. Even my fine motor, gross motor, speech didn't seem as a problem because my stepbrother at the time who has severe ADHD, Tourette's, was going through similar therapies. So to me, it didn't seem out of the norm. So being a preteen, being in a new area situation, having to, make new friends, and next thing you know, by the way, you actually can't do this. It took me a while to accept that, and I'm still learning things about all of that. But it almost led to immediate masking. So a lot of the obstacles I faced, I kind of just masked after that point. So yeah, that's a short summary.
Yeah, I mean, wow, so, you said when you got that diagnosis that you felt like you were doing great and socially you were doing great, and then all of a sudden it's like somebody telling you can't. How
Yeah.
did you talked about masking initially, but obviously we see you here. We see you being successful and doing all the things that you're doing. So how did you overcome that?
It takes a lot of therapy and a lot of hard work, and I'm still working through a lot of things because even throughout college, because I started to unmask in college a little bit by getting a puzzle piece tattoo because back then I didn't wear a shirt very often because, I was in college having fun. It was used it to open up, to have people ask me about it because it's on my back. So I don't, half the time I forget it's there because I can't see it. I actually ended up getting my master's because I was told that's what I should do. So I wouldn't say it was really succeeding because I wanted to. It's because I kind of felt I had to. You'll talk to a lot of people with disabilities that are way overqualified for a lot of things. And so that's because they feel they have to, because when they go through certain things, because you have these challenges, you have to make up for them in some way. And so it's not necessarily overcoming it. It's, just doing what you think is necessary to, I didn't necessarily to fit in because like I said, it was almost like an automatic switch that I had to do what was necessary to fit in.
Yeah. So for people who've not heard the term masking before, I'm going back a little bit. Talk about what that means. And then when you said you
Um,
started unmasking, maybe
so
give us some clear ideas of that.
the easiest way I can and put it is that we talk about a person when they go through their day, they wear different hats, right? That if you're a parent, that's one hat. You go to your job, that's another hat. The problem with someone with a neurodivergence is that it's not as easily replaceable. So it's called a mask. That's how I view it, right? Because a mask is something that, yeah, you can take off, but it's going to be vastly different, and it's going to take time to get used to not having that mask on. And so a lot of individuals, specifically like me, once you put on a mask, you don't necessarily take it off, right? So like me fitting in, so before the diagnosis, I had a chest full of toys. I had all these things. But then you get into middle school, I had nothing on my walls. I had no toys. Everything was basic. I was wearing very neutral colors because in my mind, standing out in any way could have stated that I was different and thus be subjugated to worse bullying than what I gotten. And so, yeah, that's how I view masking.
Yeah. Just trying to fit in as much as possible to what society's standard is.
Correct.
Um, you mentioned bullying. We just had a early 20 something autistic young lady send in a book share a book that she had written. She's here in Tampa as well about bullying and overcoming bullying. Was that a big part of your journey in your younger years?
Yeah, it was pretty big, and because I masked and didn't want people to know that I was different, even though they knew I was different because that's why I was being bullied, right? I went along with it, and obviously that is not okay mentally, and it led me down some paths because I was trying to be what society told me to be. So during high school, I was the dumb kid because my speech pattern is very slow, very monotonous at times. So people just thought I was dumb. So, okay, fine, I'll go with that. Right. Which led to some difficulties later on. And there were other instances that led me to wear different masks that led to even harder times because I was masking instead of trying to figure out who I was deep down. Uh, when I found joy to just bring it out and say, this is me, right? And I'm trying to unravel all of that at the ripe age of 35, which is kind of part of everything I'm going through.
I think you're doing great. I'm at the ripe age of 50 and I'm still trying to figure things out. 35 is good. So, what inspired you to become involved in advocacy for individuals with disabilities?
So when I came back to Tampa towards the end of my master's program, that was a mess, but we'll just say at the end of my master's program, I ended up interning for an ABA company during summer 2015, I guess. I don't know. So during that time, I was doing office administrative work, just, doing copying, stuff like that, just getting stuff ready for the therapist. But I would have lunch with everybody. And shortly after lunch, because it's summer camp, they would often have a movie or some sort of wind down. And so one day they had the TV on and it was set up for the VCR. And, there was a lot of background feedback going on the TV. And there was this little girl that was just going absolute nuts, just running around, causing a scene. No one knew what was going on because all the therapists had already tuned out that noise. Their brain had already said, this isn't a problem. So it tuned it out. And I just was like, that's really loud. And I told them, I was like, because I was starting to learn about sensory issues because I was never told in my diagnosis that I could have sensory issues. And since I wasn't told that, I never, questioned what I felt, I just thought people dealt with it. So since I was learning about that, I was like, you know what? Let me ask these people, like, hey, do you hear this feedback? It's really loud. So someone finally turned the TV off completely because we weren't going to watch a movie for like 5 or 10 more minutes. And guess what? The girl calmed down. She was, back to just normal. And so from that point, I was like, you know what? This may be a path I need to follow, just even if it's just for a little bit, because if I can do that for her, what can I do for other individuals, right? And so that kind of was the first instance of, okay, maybe there's more to me being different than I thought. Maybe I can help more people because the path I had to take was not a good one. The more that I uncover, the worse it gets. It's one of those things, right? But then later on, I found that individuals growing through OT and PT graduating, and then I would see individuals in their phase joining like Special Olympics that would have similar gait patterns to the kids that were still in OT PT or movement patterns. And I was like, there's a gap, right? And that was kind of the basis for my business and why I wanted to advocate for physical activity and whatnot for these individuals because they weren't getting it. And from my background, and you obviously know from your background in nursing, that it's easier to prevent things like diabetes and high blood cholesterol than it is to manage them. And so if we can prevent those from ever occurring, because healthcare right now, price wise, is absurd because people just don't take care of their bodies. And if we can help that just a little bit, then people can feel better in their day-to-day lives. They can move better, and those costs won't be, so big for everybody in general.
Well, I think too, another thing that you bring to the table with Equally Fit is that you have an understanding of disability that maybe someone who is just their traditional therapist does not. I was speaking to another young woman in our community who broke her ankle, and she didn't get it diagnosed for like 3 weeks. And then going to therapies and things like that, it was very difficult for her until she actually got with a therapist who specializes with people with disabilities. Like a lot of even the techniques and things are different. So, I think it's important to have a community, have medical, practices and services that are available specific for disability as well. And also sometimes to even just be clearly heard. So
Mhm.
you mentioned earlier that a part of the things that you were able to do to like get yourself to this space, get yourself to the person we're talking to now was therapy. When did you start therapy?
Shortly after I started the business. So I self-medicated throughout the end of high school, all the way through college with tobacco and alcohol. And so, obviously, being in the health and wellness industry, you have to kind of practice what you preach, right? And so, I decided to get rid of those things. But as soon as I got rid of them successfully, because like most people, when you're self-medicating, you try for years and years and years, and it just doesn't work. So I finally figured it out, but what came with it were massive panic attacks because I took away the specifically tobacco that calmed my nerves down because I wasn't able to successfully manage my stress up to that point. Even though I was very fitness oriented, worked out, all that stuff, that wasn't, and I'd been told by my family to try it out for years. But like most people, I was reluctant because I didn't want to tell anybody my stuff because a lot of being autistic, you're very frank, you're very open, you're very uh, there's no filter, right? So growing up, I felt that I needed a major filter, and so going to therapy really helped deal with all that stress once I was able to open up, and I found a therapist that thankfully it was a one-shot deal. I didn't have to go to too many others because I know that's troubling sometimes when you deal with disability and neurodivergent stuff. But I was able to find someone that understood kind of what I was going through. So I recommend therapy for everybody. I go at least once a year just as a checkup, just to make sure, I'm not losing it, that what I'm feeling in my life is the right direction, that it's kind of more of a soundboard. It's someone that isn't involved in my day-to-day life, that knows me, knows the people in my life, and knows, where I want my life to go, and knows that, hey, you're doing the right things or you're not doing the right things. You need to be doing this, or this may help. Read this book or read that book to kind of understand. So, fully recommend therapy.
I love it. So another thing you mentioned too, I didn't tell you some of these questions, but sorry, they're coming up as you're talking. But one of the things you mentioned, and I know it's huge right now, especially after COVID, is anxiety attacks. So what advice would you give people who are struggling with that right now?
find coping mechanisms that are healthy. So I meditate every single day. I have to. Even if I'm in a good spot, I need to meditate because that makes me grounded. That ensures that my brain is in the present because anxiety is either worrying about the future or worrying about the past. And you need to be able to stay here in this moment. My mom journals every single morning. She journals. That's very helpful for people. Also, at 8 o'clock every single night, I get a reminder to internally journal. And my internal journal is just saying something I'm grateful for that day. I do hope to increase it, but that's all that I need is to reflect on something that went well in the day because some days are worse than others. And if you can sit there at the end of the day and say, I'm grateful for at least one thing, then something good happened, right? That something is holding you here, right? And that's that's good,
Yeah.
right?
I love that. How is your involvement with organizations like the City of Tampa's Autism Friendly Tampa Advisory Board and CARD, how they impact your personal and also your professional growth?
Personally, just being able to be around like-minded individuals that wanted to help individuals with autism in the Tampa Bay area and surrounding areas. Because obviously, the more people you meet, the more people you talk with, the better understanding you have of what other people are going through. Because we oftentimes like to box in what we view disability as, but everybody views it differently because their lives are different, their backgrounds are different, their cultures are different, right? So being able to understand that, even professionally, being able to understand where people are coming from when it comes to their health and wellness and what they view important and stuff like that. So just being able to do that and being able to be a part of organizations that are more than just me, right? Because being a entrepreneur, the meetings I've had mainly are in my head. I don't have to, talk to other people to get approval or do this and do that. So being able to communicate and kind of state where you want things to go, your ideas for certain things and being able to bounce those off definitely help as a entrepreneur.
So we know you're in your doctorate journey, right?
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about your doctorate and also lessons that you've learned about yourself and going after the school.
So this degree is actually the only degree I've won because like I stated, like someone told me to get my master's, so I went and got my master's. All my friends were going to college, so I went to college. Same thing with driving. Like literally when I got into advocacy, short story before I get back into doctorate stuff, is that my first speech, I was talking to some parents, autistic parents, and we met at a public library and they're like, how'd you get here? I was like, what? What are you talking about? I drove because I hadn't been a part of the community. So they were like, you realize that's not normal. And I was like, what are you talking about? Yeah, it is. It's very normal. That's what you do when you're 16. You get your driver's license. Like, yeah, I was 16 and a half. I was a little behind, but that was the normal. And so going back to doctoral work, this is the first degree that I've wanted. It's also the first time in education I've actually realized my potential. Because throughout schooling, I was told you can't do it this way or you have to do it another way. So like with math growing up, I did it in my head. I actually had potential to be one of those math autistic people. But I was hammered down in, I think, middle school. I was actually deducted points for not showing my work. Even though I did all the work in my head, and I got the answer right. So one thing about anybody that's watching this, the world only cares if you get the answer right. They don't care how you get there. So if your teacher's telling you you got to do it a certain way, if you get it right, it doesn't matter. Keep doing it the way you do it, because I was hammered and that caused issues once I got into college when it came to math and me trying to do it ways that I wasn't used to. But also, I didn't think I would be good at things outside of my interest, because autism, you're only about your interests, right? All interests. And so I didn't put a lot of effort in undergrad if I wasn't interested in something, which led to a very low GPA. Once I got into something I was interested, GPA went up. Master's program, it was the only things I was interested about. So it was fine. Got into doctorate school, and you got to do things like stats. No one likes doing stats unless you're an actual statistician. And so, I found that I could do that and succeed at that, and be good at it without even knowing I was good at it, right? Like I would turn stuff in and I would look at, I'd be talking with my mom that week and it'd be like, I don't think I did well. I think I failed this. It's horrible. Get back A. And I'm like, what's going on? And even with writing, started college, didn't get the word count. So trouble with English throughout undergrad, and then get to master's and they're like, you got to lengthen it. So literally writing papers, I'd be like, I don't think I wrote enough. I don't think I did this. I think I, did this wrong, and come back and another A. And it's like, wow. Yeah, I'm actually good at school. And I wish I didn't learn about that, the last degree you can get. But, it's really a nice feeling to go through this and finally realize my potential. And, even in elementary school, I had teachers telling me if he just applied himself. And I'm sitting there like, how do you do that? No one sat down and was like, this is how you study. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. I had to figure that out on my own, and what worked for me. And so, finally being able to get to a point, it's really cool.
So one, I love that you are discovering it now. But for the young person with autism that may be listening, who is maybe in junior high or in high school and doesn't see that potential, what would you say? Or what would you say to your younger self?
And just keep going. And that's kind of what I did, because I actually almost dropped out freshman year of college. So my first semester was tough. There were a lot of social issues that happened. I originally was in criminal justice, wanting to be an FBI agent, because, let's see, a few years before that, all the criminal investigative, TV shows were out, and I thought I would be pretty good, at understanding people, and I really enjoyed that. But I found out shortly after getting in the criminal justice major that if you wanted to be an FBI agent, you had to spend 3 years in Quantico. And I was like, I can barely stand Alabama winter, because I was so, I don't know what was going on. I just knew I couldn't deal with it at that time. And so I freaked out and went to the career center at Alabama. I don't remember the person's name, but they just looked at my grades, didn't really talk to me, and told me, college isn't for everybody.
Mm.
And I was sitting there like, that's not what I wanted to hear. I needed something inspiring, something to, because I knew deep down, like, I would figure it out, because when you have a disability, you figure it out. And I didn't want to leave my friends. I didn't want to, do any of that stuff. So, I just stuck it out, and it took 3 years to find the major that I wanted to major in. But, there's a reason you're where you're at. There's a, You're at where you're supposed to be, and you'll figure it out when you're supposed to figure it out. So just keep going.
Thank you for joining us on Talking Inclusivity with the Hive. We hope the stories shared inspire and empower you. Remember, every voice matters, and every action can make a difference. If you haven't gotten the chance to listen to the About Us episode, a link will be provided in the show notes. Learn more about the Hive's journey for inclusive housing in Tampa. If what you hear resonates within you, join the movement. Hit subscribe and join our tribe. Let's continue to build a world where inclusion is the norm.